Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I really wanted to make a backpack, so that's what I'm gonna do. I've never made a backpack before, but I've been really into making bags recently, so I thought I'd give it a go. To make this, I chose this fabric because I really like the vibe it was giving, and if you want to make one as well, make sure it's a canvas fabric because you want it thick so that it has better structure, unless you're going to use a really thick interfacing. And for the lining, I'm just going to use whatever random fabric I can find in my fabric stash. And if you like this video, make sure you give it a like and to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I got 1 yard of fabric, which ended up being more than enough, but I always like to get a little more than I know I'll need just in case. As with most of my bags, the pattern was pretty simple, with everything being just rectangles. These are the measurements in case you're interested. If you're making this as well, you are going to need a closure and some rectangular rings for the straps. For the lining, I ended up using this blue fabric from a previous project. I originally got it as a bedsheet, but it works really well as a lining, and for dresses too. Since it was an old bedsheet, I unhemmed the really big hem that was on it so that I didn't waste all that fabric, but there were crease marks where it was folded which didn't come out even after ironing it, so I settled on leaving it and decided that those lines gave it character. I put interfacing on all the main pieces, including the strap pieces, because I wanted to make sure that this bag wasn't too floppy and that the straps would be nice and secure. I began the sewing process by making the strap pieces. I folded all of them wrong size together and sewed along the long edge with a 1 cm seam allowance so that I could turn it right side out with a safety pin. But after doing the first one, I realized that this was a very silly way of doing it because the fabric was so thick, making it extremely difficult to turn it right side out. So I changed tactics to folding over both long edges over 1 cm and then folding the whole thing in half and sewing along both sides. This worked much better and is what I did for all the strap pieces. And here are them all complete. I went on to making the flap, which I first rounded the bottom corners using a circle with a radius of 7 cm. I then marked 1 cm in from the top edges and drew a line from there to the top of the rounded corners. I cut that out for the lining as well. Then I placed the two pieces right sides together and sewed all along the sides and bottoms. I turned it right sides out and top stitched along the edge I just sewed after ironing it out. And if you notice that the crease marks on the lining just disappeared, it's because I decided that the lines actually were ugly, and so I recut them using the parts that didn't have any crease marks. I also cut notches in the rounded corners before turning it right side out so that it doesn't bunch up. And here's the finished flap. Next, I attached the bottom of the closure piece. I originally wanted to use magnetic snaps, but I couldn't find them anywhere, so I went with this other one that I don't really know the name of, but I'm really glad I did because it turned out really good. I think it turned out better than if I had used those magnetic clasps. I just marked the center and put it about 11 centimeters down from the top of the piece. Then I went on to attach the straps, which I did by putting the longest strap pieces right by the top corners of the flaps. Then I put the handle right next to them on the inside, making sure they weren't twisted, and just sewed along the top edge. I got the back piece and marked 5 centimeters down from the top along with marking the center, and then placed the flat piece along that line. I sewed all along that edge. Then I got the other final strap piece and placed it 4 centimeters from the top. I stitched along both sides to keep it in place. While I was making it, I cut out these additional pieces because I decided that it would be nice to have a pocket on the outside of the backpack to keep my phone in, along with a way to charge my phone while it was in the pocket. So I cut out a pocket, facing, and a flap. I made the pocket and flap by putting them right sides together and sewing along the edge, leaving a bit open so I could turn it right side out. Once I turned it right side out, I top stitched along the top of the piece. Then I took the front back piece and placed the pocket where I wanted it to go and sewed along the bottom and sides. For the facing, I did cut out the lining piece which you saw in the previous clip, but I did not end up using it. I placed the facing just where the pocket ended and sewed a rectangular shape slightly smaller than the pocket. I cut within the rectangle so that I could turn the facing to the other side afterwards. It was a little tricky because you need to cut very close to the stitching but not on it. If you are doing this, make sure to use very sharp scissors. Once I did that, I turned the facing to the other side and top stitched around the rectangle so it would stay in place. Then finally, I placed the flap over it, slightly overlapping the top of the pocket so you won't be able to see the gaping hole above the pocket. And this is how it looked once it was done. I thought it was pretty good and proud of how I made it. Next, I made the inside pocket. Don't mind the stain on it, it was just water that got on while I was ironing it. I folded it in half and sewed along the 3 edges, leaving a hole to turn it inside out. But once I made it, I realized that I accidentally used the piece that was supposed to be the back lining piece, and I didn't want to ruin the fabric by unpicking it, so I just did what I could to make it work. Thankfully, the pocket piece was bigger than the back piece, so I just had a smaller pocket than I originally intended, but I still had a back piece. I would have just cut out another piece, but I did not have enough fabric left. Then I placed the right side of the front piece to the right side of the back piece and sewed along both edges. I took the bottom pieces for the bag and rounded out all 4 corners for both the maining and lining fabric using a circle with a radius of 5 centimeters. I took the lining one and attached it to the lining of the bag, matching up the centers and backs. It can be a little tricky, so I made sure to take my time when sewing. And that completes the lining portion of the bag. At this point, I was waiting for the rectangular rings that I ordered to arrive so that I could continue working on the straps. And once they finally did, this is what they looked like. So I switched gears back to making the straps and took the tiny strap pieces and put them around the long side of the ring. I sewed them on the back piece 2.5 centimeters from the edge. And I did this to both sides. Then I got the rings with the bar in the middle and put the long straps through them. And then I put them through the rings we just attached, and I don't really know how it all worked, so I had to look it up, and so I'm not going to try to explain it, but this is how it turned out. I think they turned out pretty good. And I also finally got my custom tag that I ordered, so I was so excited to put them in this bag. I think it's so pretty, and now everyone will know that I handmade it. I put it on the lining, making sure it was centered. Next, I did the same thing I did earlier with the lining by putting the front and back together and sewing both edges, then putting in the bottom. But before I put in the bottom, I took the drawstring channel and hemmed both short edges, folded it in half wrong side to wrong side, and sewed it to the top of the bag. I also marked the center to make sure it would be even. I used the 5mm seam allowance and sewed all around the top so that it wouldn't be visible in the end. And then I just did what I mentioned before by sewing in the bottom. I was getting really excited at this point because I was getting so close to finishing. I next turned the main bag inside out and put the lining, which was right side out, into the main bag. I pinned all along the top and sewed it, leaving an opening so that I can turn it right side out. Then I flipped it right side out and top stitched right under the drawstring channel to close it all up. And here I'm just showing you where to top stitch. I attached the top of the closure in the center of the flap to complete the closure. Then to make the phone charging hole accessible from the inside, I cut a slit with slits along the four corners of the rectangular hole and folded it over so that there would be no raw edges. I was originally going to hand sew this part, but I tried top stitching it and it worked fairly well, so that's what I went with. For the drawstrings, I wasn't really sure what to use, so I ended up using some yarn that I braided. It took a while to braid it and it was kind of annoying because it was so long, but I didn't really have anything else. I also waxed it because I thought it might make it stronger, but I don't really know if that was necessary. I just threaded it through the drawstring channel and put the cord stop, which finally completed the backpack. This is the final product and I think it turned out really cute. I think I did quite well considering this was my first backpack I've ever made, but in the future I might make more new and improved, which makes me super excited just thinking about. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Bye!